Welcome back to Let's Make a Game, a channel about making computer role-playing games using the free program Twine and the Sugarcube format for Twine. In this video, I would like to continue talking about my current project of coding the combat system for a viewer's game. In particular, we are finally ready to start talking about the player character and their companions having and using different weapons. Up until now, we've been just giving all of them a pistol, but that's not what the game intends. There are quite a lot of weapons with different stats, different advantages and disadvantages, and the idea is that the player character and companions will be able to find different weapons and swap between them and use them. And I've been promising for a long time that next video or sort of the video after that, we'll start talking about weapons. But so far, something's come up and I haven't. But as of now, I actually have done so. Before I start talking about that, I should say something. This is only going to be of interest or only really going to be understandable to people who saw the last video. So if you didn't see the last video, I'm sorry. This next bit is not going to mean much to you, but it does have to be said. And that is, last video, I said that in this video, I would be talking about a problem that I had realized existed with one of the orders that the player character can give to their companions, which is to charge. I said that there might be a case where there's no one to charge, and therefore I thought that that would generate either an error or an infinite loop, or in some way the program wouldn't work properly because I hadn't accounted for that possibility yet, because I thought it would only arise in this very special circumstance. But in fact, when I looked at the code, I found that no, I had already accounted for that, or I had already made code that could handle that, because and I'd forgotten this. The code for when the companions charge only looks for companions that are on the ground. It doesn't look for enemies that are flying. So I think I might have said companions that are on the ground, enemies that are on the ground. It only looks for enemies that are on the ground. It doesn't look for enemies that are hovering in the air. And because most of the enemies in this game are giant adult mosquitoes who do hover in the air, that's a situation that can happen very often. And therefore, that's a situation that I had thought of and had a solution to in the code. So that's not a thing that happens very often when you're looking at code. Usually, in my experience, you'll look at code that you thought was finished and you'll go, oh, hang on, that doesn't work if that assumes that such and such will happen. But actually, some of the time this might happen and I haven't accounted for that. And you'll realize that you have to do an extra bit. But occasionally you realize that something you thought you had to deal with has already been dealt with. So that's nice. And we can talk about weapons. So here we have a sort of crude map of the combat, the map that we've been using for testing only, because it's not meant to look like this. It's meant to have a first-person display rather than this top-down text display. But at the bottom here, we've got all of the orders, all of the options, I guess, all of the actions that the player character can take because it is their turn. But we've got a new one. We've got inventory, as well as the ones we've already talked about. So if I click on inventory, it shows me what is in my virtual backpack, essentially. In this case, I have a fragmentation grenade, and a flame spray, and in hand, I have a pistol. Now, I've only coded looking at the inventory and also randomly assigning some stuff to the inventory so that we can look at it and test it and demonstrate it. So there's no options there's none of the options you might expect yet. You might expect, well, I should be able to swap the pistol for the frag grenade, or I should be able to take the frag grenade in my other hand and throw it or whatever. But I can't do that yet because we've only just set up the system. All I can do is press return, and then it takes me back to where we were, and I can choose a more meaningful option. But of course, now that we've got that, we can then go on to set up manipulating the stuff that's in the inventory, and that's what I'll be doing in future videos. So as usual, I'd like to spend the rest of the video explaining how the code that does the thing I just showed you works. So that's what I'll do. Now, we're first going to have to look in initialize, because, as you might expect, if we're going to start keeping track of things that the characters have in their inventory, well, we need some variables where we're going to store that stuff. And therefore, you might think, we will need some new variables. And you're absolutely right. So I'm just going to scroll down. So we have the array inventory, $inventory. Inventory is often used in computer games as a phrase for the stuff that a character is carrying. I think this might go back to old text games, the sort of game where you'd go get lamp or, walk north, that sort of thing. Which I've talked a bit about how to simulate in Twine, by the way, but those sort of games. But in those sort of games, often you could enter INV or invent or inventory, and that would tell you everything you're carrying. So I think that's where that became the sort of standard phrase, maybe. Anyway, it's called inventory. It's a two-dimensional array, with one dimension being which character and one dimension being which slot of the inventory. And so we need to set it up, which we do down here. And we have a little description which says that inventory 0y is the yth slot in the player character's inventory. Otherwise, inventory zy is the yth slot in companion z's inventory. Sorry, I think I said infantry then. So in other words, inventory 05 is the fifth slot in what the player character is carrying, and inventory 15 is the equivalent slot in companion 1's inventory, and then inventory 25 is the equivalent slot in companion 2's inventory. And then I have down here positive number equals weapon, because the idea is that this is not just what weapons the characters have, it's also at least going to be what ammunition they're carrying, and maybe what other items they're carrying that are relevant to the adventure but not relevant to combat in particular. And if we have different types of weapons, if we have different types of items, it's usually good to have some simple way of determining what broad class of item a given slot contains. So we might say positive numbers are weapons. At the moment, that's the only one we've got because that's the only one we've done, but we'll be adding others as we go. So we might say positive number is a weapon, and we might say a negative number is ammunition, and then we might say, all right, a positive number over 100 is a miscellaneous item. So if it's got a value of 105, that doesn't mean the 105th weapon. It means the 5th non-combat item, for example. And then we might do the same thing with sort of random 102 means the second type of item of some other category. I will only be doing the combat-related types of items, but I've set it up this way so it should be fairly easy for the viewer whose game this is going to be to do their bit of it, which is to add the non-combat stuff. So moving right along, the other one we have, the one that we're going to be using probably less, is inventory underscore slots, and that is set arbitrarily to 10. I wasn't told that that's the amount. We have to have a number that's the maximum they can carry, and I just chose 10. And that is the maximum number of items in a given character's inventory. So we have to set up the array inventory as a two-dimensional array, and we do this in a way that we've done many times before, where we have a for loop, and we have Z goes from either 0 or 1 to whatever it goes up to, and we set the array slot Z to itself be an array, because that's the way that you set up two-dimensional arrays in this language. You can't just say, in some languages you can just say set up inventory as an array, and then you might have two sets of brackets or something, or two sets of square brackets, and that would indicate that it was two-dimensional. In this, you have to sort of set every slot up by hand, as it were, or individually. And if you're setting up a three-dimensional array, then you have to set up every slot in the two-dimensional array to itself be an array. So it can be a bit of a pain if you have a three-dimensional array, but usually you don't use more than 2 dimensions in my experience. All right, so now we've set those things up. Well, in the real game, presumably they'll be empty to start with. I mean, they might start with some money. I don't know how that works, but basically you would imagine the characters would start with pretty much nothing. They might start with a pistol in hand, but if you notice the note under inventory, I did say that the weapon we've already got what weapon they're using stored in the array weapon, $WEAPON, and I decided that we're not going to double that information. We're just going to have weapon is the weapon that they're carrying in their favoured hand, because we might be carrying weapons in our offhand as well. There it is. And then inventory is stuff that's sort of stored for later. It's either in the backpack, or it's holstered, or it's, whatever. And then we'll be passing data between inventory and weapon when the player, puts away a weapon and exchanges it for another, which presumably they will do in the course of the game. All right, so we've set up... the only other thing I want to say is we're going from 0, not 1, because we're using 0 something for the player character. And we're going up to com_max, which is the maximum number of companions, which is currently set to 2, but could easily be changed, because of course we need one array for every companion, because they're carrying separate stuff, of course. All right, so having set up the array, in real life, in a real game, presumably it would basically start empty, but to simulate sort of being in the middle of a game and making sure that things work when they've got a few items, it's a good idea to sort of, for this demonstration, randomly give them some stuff so that we can look at it and make sure that all the things we want to do with the inventory actually work. And I decided to do that on its own passage called generate inventory. If it's a passage by itself, well, we can just delete it and change the links slightly so it skips over it. It's sort of easy to find the code that we don't need. So generate companions used to go to roll initiative, but I changed generate companions so it goes to generate inventory, and then generate inventory goes to roll initiative. So generate inventory, and just to emphasize that this is going to be deleted when in the final game, I've put this is testing only. And in the future, if we ever want to check that we've got rid of all the things that need to be gotten rid of, all we need to do is go to story, find and replace, and find testing only, and it'll light up all of the passages where I've put that that phrase, and therefore I'll know, well, I haven't eliminated this bit yet. So it's good to have a sort of standard phrase for, you know, stuff that's going to be deleted later. All right, so generate inventory. It's fairly simple. We have a for loop that goes from 0 to com_max again. And then we go from 1 to inventory_slots. So 0 to 2 in this case. Z is going to go from and to, and Y is going to go from 1 to, in this case, 10. And then we just put a random weapon in the slot a fifth of the time. So if random bracket 1, 5 end bracket is equal to 1, then set inventory ZY equal to random 1, WEA underscore OVR dot length minus 1. Now, WEA underscore OVR stands for weapon overview, and it is an array that has some of the details of all the weapons. So this is just saying pick a number from 1 to the highest numbered weapon. So 1 to 10 if there's 10 weapons, 1 to 20 if there's 20 weapons. The advantage of doing it this way rather than saying 1 to 20 or 1 to 30 or whatever is that if I change the weapons, this will automatically work because it'll still look at this and get the correct amount. I don't have to change the number as well as changing the details of the weapons. So if the player thinks, actually, I don't know that these two weapons are all that different, why don't I just have one? Or conversely, I haven't got there's a particular type of weapon, I haven't got an RPG launcher and I really want to have that in there. I'll put that in. Well, they can put that in and it won't mess this up. Albeit this is all going to be deleted anyway, so in this case it's not all that, it's not as important if we add weapons to make sure that they get in there, but I suppose you want the chance. So at the end of this, every character has got possibly some extra weapons, probably some extra weapons, but it's quite possible that we never got a 1 on this random thing because we're only doing it 10 times, so maybe they don't. But either way, next thing we have to do is give the player character the option to look at their inventory, and that is extremely easy. I've decided to not make it an action. I don't know exactly. I think the viewer whose game this is going to be has told me what they want, but I didn't remember it off the top of my head, so I'll have to look at that again. But at the moment, it's not an action to look at your inventory or to get a weapon out. It's just it's a sort of like a free thing you can do. It doesn't count as one of the 2 actions that you have per turn. So all we do is, this is the code where we print all the buttons that are related to actions the player character might be able to perform on their turn. And we just have a button down the bottom that says inventory, and there's no ifs or anything. There's no requirements for this because you can always look at your inventory. Even if you don't have any inventory, you can just look at the fact that you don't have any, and that's fine. So we have button. It has the text inventory with a capital I, and it goes to the passage inventory with a lowercase I. And if either of these had spaces, I would need to enclose them in quotes, but neither of them do, so I don't need to do that. I could have still done it, and it would be, it would still work. Like if I did that would still be valid code, but you don't have to do it. I probably should still do it just to be in the habit so that I do it when I need to do it, but I don't, and it seems fine. I don't make that mistake anyway. So what happens when we go to inventory? Well, first of all, we set print_dist equal to 1. What does that mean? Well, that means the next time you think about whether you should print that map of the battlefield, it tells the computer, yeah, do that. Because if we look at our inventory and go back, we want to see where all the enemies are again before we make our choice. We don't want to just get the buttons that say shoot, retreat, give an order, etc. We want to be able to see where everyone is. So we do that. Then we have a table, a HTML table. And then right at the bottom we have a button to go back to where we were, but I'll talk about that one later. So we have a table, we have a for loop. It goes from 1 to inventory underscore slots, so 1 to 10 in this case. And then it looks at inventory 0Z, because we're looking at the player character's inventory, naturally. I might add the option to look at what the other what the companions are carrying later. Presumably you're not actually literally looking at it, you're just sort of displaying it. You remember, and it's displaying your, it's reminding you of what your character remembers, I suppose, in that case. So you're not able to swap things out or anything, but you probably should be able to look at what the companions have, or get the computer to tell you what the companions have. But at the moment, we're only looking at the player characters one. So if inventory 0Z is greater than 0, in other words, if there's something in there, then we go TR and TD, and then we print a slot in WEA underscore OVR. It's WEA underscore OVR something 0, and the something is inventory 0Z. So we might say inventory 0Z is greater than 0. What is it? It's 5. Okay, well in that case, we print WEA, oh my goodness, WEA underscore OVR, which stands for weapon overview, 50. And that particular, in WEA underscore OVR, something 0 is the name of that particular weapon. So let's look at WEA underscore OVR. To remind ourselves, we would have, that's WEA underscore ATT, here we go. That would be a sharp machete. So if we had that particular value in our inventory, it would recognize it and it would print just machete bracket sharp end bracket. And of course, if with different values, that they represent different weapons. And then we close off the TD, we close off the TR. So that is a HTML table with only one cell in a line. And you might say, well, gee, doing that as a HTML table seems a bit of overkill. Why don't we just print it and put a couple of, put a line break? Well, the answer is because we're going to have other commands on this row. So we will have the weapon, and then we might have, grab this weapon or use this weapon or something like that. But for now, because we're just looking, we just have one thing. But we're sort of coding it in expectation that we're going to have other options next to this name of the weapon. And then we have else. So what is else? Well, inventory 0Z might be less than 0. So we might end up turning this into, if it's less than 0, that might represent ammunition or something. Well, then we might print, the name of that type of ammunition, for example. But as we can see here with this note, that's not done. All we've done is just the names of weapons so far. And then the for loop ends. And then we have another row, tr, td, /td, /tr. And in here, we have in hand, and we have WEA underscore OVR something 0. And this time the something is $weapon 0. $weapon 0 being what weapon the player character has in their hand, which of course is a pistol. But of course, coming soon, probably coming in the next video, we're going to have that value change as they swap weapons. And so that will print anything that's in your inventory. If there's nothing in your inventory at the moment, it won't print a blank. Like you can print an inventory, you can print sort of a blank, like maybe dash, something like you might want to print dash or something for each empty slot, so you know how many slots you have left. But I've chosen not to do that and just to print what you have. And then finally, of course, we need to get out of this page. So we have a button and the text is return. The destination is whose go is it? And there's no code that executes when you click the button other than moving you, because if there was, that'd be where that blinking cursor is. We go back to whose go is it rather than back to player character. We came here from player character. Why don't we go back to player character? Well, because at whose go is it, that's where we have this. You might remember that in inventory we set print underscore dist to 1. Well, it only checks if print dist is equal to 1 at whose go is it. So we have this code here. If that variable is 1, we set it to 0, and then we include print distances, i.e. we print where everyone is. And because we want that to happen, we go back to whose go is it rather than back to where we came from. We go back to here, it will print out the map, it'll move us to player character, and then that's how we sort of get back there, if that makes sense. And that's how we print our inventory. The next thing that I will probably do is the code to allow the player to tell the player character to pick a new weapon. So to put their pistol away and pick up a flash grenade or something, and change their mind and put that one back, and etc. I have to check whether doing so is meant to count as an action. I know that the viewer whose game it is has told me how they want that to work, or I think they have, but I can't remember off the top of my head what it is, so I have to read our correspondence and find that out and code it. But for now, I will leave it there. I hope that was useful or interesting to at least some of you, and I hope you will tune in next time.